Hello and welcome to Canvas, the Niger-Delta Roundtable, where I discuss the future of this region blessed with humongous hydrocarbon resources. Now, every week we give time to reflecting on topics relevant to the development of the Niger-Delta and her people. And this edition is no different as we're here to focus once again on how to take the region to a more promising future. And be reminded, the program is sponsored by the operator of the NNPC SPDC Total Energies Active Joint Venture, the Shell Petroleum Development Company of Nigeria Limited, headquartered in Port Harcourt. And thanks for joining. I am Adid Dayo Ilushakin. The topic for this edition of Canvas is Climate Action for Dummies. In this episode, we'll be discussing the urgent need for climate action and how each of us can make a difference. From innovative technologies to grassroots movements, we'll highlight inspiring stories and practical steps you can take to contribute to a healthier planet. So, whether you're a seasoned environmentalist or just starting to learn about climate issues, there's something here for everyone. Let's ignite the conversation and empower ourselves to create change. Stay with us as we explore the challenges and triumphs in the fight against climate change, and together we can make a difference one action at a time. Again, a topic for this episode is Climate Action for Dummies. And my guest is Dr. Mina Ogbanga. Dr. Mina Ogbanga is an author, academic, development activist, and policy advocate. She has over 24 years demonstrated experience in mainstreaming gender in the development process and pursuing environmental and social justice. She has led several climate action initiatives, especially as the creative director of the Club17 Africa. Dr. Mina Ogbanga, hi, welcome to Canvas Niger-Delta Roundtable.
Good morning. Thank you, Dayo.
What is climate change and why is it important for everyone to understand?
Okay, let's start from imagining where we are right now. You feel cool and you go outside, you feel hot, and instantly there are two different reactions to the two different settings. That is just for the layman to know that climate change has something to do with the environment, with the state of the environment. So you see, climate change refers to the long-term warming of the planet due to an increase in temperature. And then you discover that this phenomenon is primarily caused by either human activities, mostly which is such as burning of fossil fuel, deforestation, talk about pollution, which leads to an increase in these greenhouse gases like carbon dioxide and methane. And then so understanding climate change becomes very crucial because it affects everyone. It is not a respecter of parties, it's not a respecter of geographical location, it's not a respecter of socioeconomic status. Rising temperatures, they have severe consequences, including extreme weather, events that go on, sea level rise and, disruption to the ecosystem, food systems and human health. So climate change, that increase in temperature, note, the point there is long term. You understand? Long term warming of the planet, meaning that something has been warming this planet over time. So this long-term warming of the planet has led to that increase in global temperatures. And the warming are caused by different things, including man-made activities. So for beginners, just know that there's something about climate change that relates and interfaces with the warming of the environment, that leads to rising temperature. And what happens when you have rising temperature? You see that there are lots of changes that take place in the environment, within the environment, and even within the people themselves. Yeah.
Thanks. When I thought of when I conceived this conversation, when I was thinking about it, and interestingly, the topic, that we chose for this climate action for dummies. And by the way, if you're watching this right now, you're not a dummy. The whole idea is we want to break it down to ensure that we all understand what it's about. And you've explained the whole concept of climate change. However, why should I bother about it? Why should I be concerned about it? You said it's long term. How does it affect me as a person? Why should I care about this as an individual?
Okay, so you should care for many reasons. You see that climate change, for many reasons you should really care because of the huge impact that climate change has on our society as an individual and in everything you do. Okay, imagine, just let's look at the very simple thing like having more rains than you normally have. You don't think it affects your activities? You understand?
Mm.
Doesn't it affect your daily activity when you see a period where you're supposed to be feeling hot, or you're having dry season and you're having rainy season, when you're supposed to be having rainy season, having dry season, when you're supposed to be experiencing smooth weather, you're experiencing floods. You don't think this affects you. You understand? So these are some of the things, because you see that the impact of climate change on our little in our life generally, it may seem subtle to some, it may be more intense to some who are experiencing huge natural disasters. You understand, which are also outcomes of this kind of thing. But you discover that it affects us in our little activities and in bigger ways. For example, we talk about the heat waves and changing weather patterns. That's what I described earlier. You talk about changing weather patterns. You have, impact on our air quality. You have impact on human comfort. You have impact on outdoor activities. A lot of things are now defined by the kind of environment you find yourself in. So you wake up and you say, "Cool, I'm going for a run today," and you discover that suddenly it starts raining. And you say, "But this is February, or let's say this is April, or whatever it is that is not supposed to be, or this is December. Why is it raining in December?" That kind of thing. So these are the some, and you see that all this affect also rising food prices. You look at rising food prices in the market, and you go to the market to buy, you see food that, besides the economic issues that are going on, food prices are high. Why? Because the farms were not yielding fruits. There are issues around reduced crop yield due to influence of food security issues. You see that food impact is huge in its own way. And then you see warmer temperature. Warmer temperatures are another big thing. You see people feeling sudden heat waves. All these are all part of the things why we should worry. What's going on? What's affecting us? And we don't even need to wait for it to get more intense. Have you seen that there are lots of vector-based diseases now? You have climate-related, what will I call it? Climate-related stress on mental health. You see a lot of people feeling hot, are not comfortable. Their environments are not conducive for people to do work. People are getting into taking too much of cold things, or just to complement the huge impact of climate change. So you see that for everybody there is a very huge impact that we're only just acknowledging now in a lot of countries, in a lot of communities, that is related to climate change. So as a human, should we care? Yes, we should care, because even if you talk about all the goals, from the health to the food security to education to gender issues, climate change has huge impact.
Maybe it's supposed to be like that. Maybe that's the natural order of things. I say that because if you're a scientist or listen to science or scientists and their postulations and theories, they say we had a dinosaur age, and there was some cataclysmic event, and the dinosaurs died off, and the earth rebuilt itself, or whatever happened, and then life continued or restarted, as it were. So maybe it's all part of it. Maybe it's supposed to happen. Maybe all of these natural events are supposed to happen. There's supposed to be some cataclysm, and then the world will do what it does all over again. And we shouldn't really be bothered about it. And there's not much that we can do to actually change the course of things.
Okay, so I'm going to hold you to that. That means you're one of those that have that misconception. And that is why action have not been taken for some, and some are still wondering, how do I go about this? It's a big misconception to imagine that it's just normal, it should happen. No, the climate change is not normal. There's something abnormal about it. It is normal, like for green, they talk about the greenhouse gas effect. You have those gases, they capture those, to make the earth livable, to make people able to live. So you see that there are gases that do that capture, like a blanket over, and to make it warm enough for people to survive, for plants to grow, for ecosystem to thrive, for biodiversity to take place, for you and I to move about our normal way. That you can call normal. But now you're discovering that the anthropocenic activities, there are lots of human-driven activities that is changing that normal process. So it is not as normal as it should be. And because it's not as normal as it should be, we need to now address it with the urgency it deserves. Because there are lots of things. Wrong, poor burning of fossil fuel is affecting climate, you understand, is increasing these gases, and it's increasing temperature, and it's increasing a lot of other effects. And these are changing the tides of things. So you see that it's not a normal process and we cannot treat it as such. It's one of the misconceptions that many had that, oh, climate change is just normal, no big deal, nothing. Until you see your house flooded, until you see your schools, you can't go there, until you see that food prices have increased, until you see that a lot of changes have taken place. You see that, the even some very, very insignificant issues are becoming so significant, like diseases. So all those things tell you that no, it's not a normal incident, and we need to address it now because before it goes out of proportion.
Whenever conversations on the climate are ongoing, there are certain terms, expressions that are used often, and you just use one of them now. That's the greenhouse effect. Could you explain that, in simpler terms?
Okay, excellent. Now, when you talk about the greenhouse effect, it's a natural process. Like I said, where certain gases in the Earth's atmosphere, like you're talking about carbon and then carbon dioxide and water vapor, you see that they trap heat from the sun and they keep out the planet, keep it warm, keep the planet warm enough to sustain life. Now, imagine a blanket coming round the Earth, and then retaining heat. So, but incidentally, that natural process, like I was trying to say earlier, is now disrupted because human activities have increased greenhouse gas concentration, intensifying the effect and leading to this global warming. So the greenhouse gas effect is a natural process. So you see that God didn't make any mistake. He put everything in place perfectly and set these gases to be able to trap this heat, to make it warm enough for us to live. So we don't stay in an environment that is too cold or too, unlivable, like some planets could be right now. So, but you see that in fact, several human activities is affecting that dynamics, and it is changing, and it's now also changing the narrative around climate change.
I know I asked a similar question earlier, but I'd like to double down. So, there are parts of the world that are prone to natural disasters, and maybe the occurrence or the frequency of these natural disasters are a major source for concern right now, and many link them to climate change. But for those of us, especially in this climate, in Africa, West Africa, Nigeria, the Niger-Delta, that are not prone to natural disasters, compared to some other parts of the world, in the West especially, should we be bothered? I mean, we're cool, right? We're okay. Yeah, maybe a little flood here and there, but we don't have tornadoes, no hurricanes, no nothing of that sort. So are we not good?
Okay, so you see, that is the beginning of the challenge, because you discover that you don't have natural disasters such as all those things that have been mentioned. Unfortunately, I will call it, you have human disaster. You have uh, why you have natural disaster in some places. And don't get it wrong at all. We do have our own level of natural disasters in Nigeria, and these are traced to different things, which cannot also be unconnected to climate change in a lot of ways. So we have our own level of natural disasters. And tell me, for crying out loud, just one in Benue stopped yam from coming to Port Harcourt. I mean, break it down. We're talking about breaking it all down to, let us understand these matters very well. One flood in Benue, one in Ahoda East is stopping agricultural activities, thereby increasing food prices, thereby increasing challenges about livelihood and existence, thereby increasing hunger because you're earning the same salary, but you're using it to pay for a loaf of bread that could have been, or a piece of yam that was like 500 before. Because of all these incidents of natural disasters that occur at different levels, you see that same yam of 500, you hardly find any yam for 500 anymore. Now we're talking about buying a piece of a yam, or you buying a one yam for 4,000, 5,000 naira for one, and it is from the same salary. So that is looking at the economic impact already. You are seeing it. So yeah, we're cool, right? We're cool to the extent to which we can be, but we don't want to be taken by surprise. And that is why this conversation is so key. This conversation is so strategic, because it helps us to now start thinking, what am I doing to contribute to this climate change? Can I reduce it? And that is, I'm sure at some point we'll talk about those reduction processes. But for now, the impact has been broken down to this level for you to see that don't imagine the global world. Yes, there are high polluters, but their activities are affecting us. You see, the activities are affecting us from exchange, from because it's globalization now, that is the experience. So you cannot run away from the fact that because there's a flood in or earthquake in London, don't worry, you're good. And the impacts are high. If you're an importer, you know that this impact cannot be described. You see, so you discover that the world is linked now. It's a global. We are in a global framework. We're connected in a lot of ways. So you cannot, by virtue of playing the ostrich, imagine that because it happened there, it will not happen here. It is nobody saw a lot of things that are happening now. Even when they have the different diseases, vector-led disease that we had, a lot of biodiversity changes, a lot of ecosystem interference and disruptions. All those things, nobody saw them coming. You understand, a lot of ways. But these are the things that happen, because many people felt, oh no, climate change won't get to us, it won't affect us. But now we're seeing it loud and clear, and I think it's time for us to take some action.
We'll get to the action part in a
Yes.
moment, but you've said severally in the course of the conversation thus far that all the climate change and what's going on is caused by it's man-made, it's caused by human activity. What exactly are these human activities that's bringing about the climate change?
Okay, so you see that a lot of things are happening. Prior to this time, structures are built with master plans which include some garden areas, some green areas, some, I'm giving an example now from an individual point of view. But you see that a lot of houses, a lot of estates, a lot of construction work is being done without understanding that there's need for us to plant trees, because the role the trees play in our society, in our lives as individual and collective, is huge. So you see that there's a lot of deforestation going on in order to accommodate some development initiatives without providing alternatives, to those deforestation. So when you practice deforestation, think through reforestation as well. You understand? But a lot of deforestation is going on without any replacement. So you see that we are exposing ourselves so much more, to the ozone layer. We're exposing ourselves so much, and we're having a kind of interaction with little support to capture those heat waves that come in. So in a lot of ways, you now discover that this deforestation, which is purely man-made, is man that cuts trees. You see, daily you have cutting trees in the name of doing one thing, in the name of providing fuel for communities, some communities called, in the name of construction, in the name of anything. You can think of so many things. That is key. So that has led to a lot of exposure to the impact of climate change. And then you now talk about pollution. You now talk about pollution of different types from industrialization activities. Now we are not talking about people shouldn't be involved in industry, but responsible practices is key, to reducing the impact of climate change. And then you talk about the issues around fossil fuel burning, irresponsive or how will I call it, irresponsible fossil fuel burning. And I will not even need to go too much into illegal mining, all this. They are very, very intense means of affecting our climate, leading to a lot of things. And once the temperature increases, the antecedent that goes with it is clearer. Yeah, so that is something that we cannot run off. There are many, many other man-made activities. You burn a lot of bush burning, irresponsible bush burning. You have a lot of practices where you're emitting energy unduly. You understand? So all these things that men, women do, in their own little way, affects the climate very
To
seriously.
come back to these activities in a
Yes.
moment, I think it's key we explore it some more. However, in the course of doing your work, um, you must have come across, certain misconceptions that people have regarding climate change or climate action and anything associated. What are some of these more common misconceptions?
Okay, there are many misconceptions. People feel initially prior to this time, prior to when it got really, really bad, people felt climate change is just a normal weather change until they discovered that they couldn't, there is what you call the weather forecast. It's easy to say this is what's going to happen. But now it's not as easy to pin down the weather at sometimes. You understand? Because you are now planning, oh, the weather forecast told me in the morning that there's no rain. So I didn't take my umbrella. You just step out of your house right on the road and you discover and it doesn't come in small folds. The rainfall comes in real massive, ways. So you discover that what's happened. So even in weather forecast, they need to be extra sensitive to be able to capture You understand? So there's the misconception that it was just normal until the recent activities that are going on. There's also the misconception that climate change is just it's a very expensive process to manage, and you discover that um, so nothing can be done about it. No, that is wrong. There are many little things you can do from your room. Anything you can do to reduce emission from your room, which you're going to talk about, is also one way of reducing climate change. There are misconceptions saying that it is from the gods who are angry with some communities. So you see some communities are facing a lot of fire outbreak, facing a lot of flooding, that it is anger of the gods, and anger of the gods. So you see that there's a social misconception, there's an economic misconception, there's a physical misconception, there's scientific misconception. A lot of things are making people, we're making people not understand why they should bother about climate change. Until now, we're seeing the effects at every point. It is beyond political party impact. It does not say because you're APC or because you're PDP it will affect. No, climate change affects all parties, affect all economic status group, because if you breathe air, then you're susceptible to the impact of climate change. So those conceptions are changing gradually from different bodies of understanding, and even our communities are getting more aware, and hopefully those misconceptions are being redirected in more positive ways.
My next question is somewhat compounded. I'm going to pack a lot into this
Oh
next
wow.
question. So, and let's go back to those actions you referenced a while ago, how we're all contributing to climate change. And you talked about, we're constructing more, we're building houses, we're burning fossil fuels, we're doing this, we're doing that, we're cutting down trees, developments, construction, and all that is natural, right? I mean, we need to build, we need to move from place to place, we need to burn fossil fuels. We're going to do that. The world needs to move on. The world's population is growing. I don't know, where are we now? 8 billion or 9 billion, whatever it is. We're growing and we need to expand. People need to live in houses. People need to move from point A to point B. And to do that, our source of energy right now is mostly fossil fuels. Now, I'm an individual. What could I possibly do that's going to change this? So, the one, we need to do this because we have to build, we have to move, we have to do all of that, we have to grow. And then, what are the actions that I can take as an individual to reduce carbon footprint? It's just me, it's just one person. Taking it into account as well that we need to do these things.
I love the fact that you're looking from the microcosm. That's as an individual. So you can imagine the macrocosm. I'm so sorry I can't tell you Nigeria's population in specific terms right now. If you can help me, you can help. But I know the last time I had 220, one time I had 200. I think we are between 200 and 220. Now imagine if each one has to contribute. You see that the world will be a better place. What are those things you need to do? Let's start from, in terms of reducing your carbon footprint. Think of something as simple as reducing energy consumption, where you use energy efficient appliances. There was a time we used to have those bulbs that were used for lighting. They had this yellow fill and all those things. You know that we have now more energy saving bulbs. You understand? If I'm not mistaken, most of the houses now have energy saving bulbs. And for our own good, for crying out loud, if you recall, those yellow lights we used to have that were lights before, they were a bit warmer on the system. But now you see those energy saving bulbs, not only are they brighter, whiter, but they're also a bit less hotter than the other one. So energy saving bulbs they do a lot. You turn off your lights when you need to insulate your homes, when you need to. These are simple measures that you need to take, because those things that you're doing that you think, they're just little things, they are ultimately contributing to helping to reduce that emission, that we experience. Then what about eating plant-based diets? Because you see the animal agriculture, for example, contributes a lot, significantly, greenhouse gas emission. Anything that has to do with industrial production or anything. But plant-based diets, lots of vegetables. In a sense, climate change is also helping us to see our health, as a priority in different ways. Unknown to us, is a key way of also helping our systems. Like, for example, now using sustainable transportation system, you see that a lot of cars, some emit a lot of carbon, and a lot of cars that are not particularly well taken care of. Even cars that are good, continuous use of that. So why don't you think of using like more sustainable transportation alternatives? Like, you can walk to the office if it's close to your home. If it's not close, some people cycle to the office. There's some practices. There's a call for mindset reorientation What are those little things that you can do? You can talk about using cycling to school. Most of the presidents and prime ministers we hear around the world, they are on cycles. They're not foolish. But perhaps their environment also, makes provisions for those things because they have good sidewalks, they have safe streets, they have all those things. So we need to, in thinking of safer city, cleaner city, healthier city, and all those things, we need to mainstream components of climate change into our construction processes, more sustainable climate change processes. We could look at hybrid vehicles. We cannot tell whether CNG is the way to go, but you could look at considering all these options. And if you're looking at other options, also we think how can these options support our overall climate carbon footprint. So there are many things as an individual that you can do to help reduce that climate change and reduce greenhouse gases from your home to your workplace and to wherever you are interacting with. You turn off the lights. It's a very simple step, but it has helped in a lot of ways because where that light is being generated from also has its own outcome. So lots of things that individuals can do now, from planting even as simple as planting trees around your home, which will help us to trap all these negative gases, are also helpful. So there are many, many steps that people can take as individuals, at community level, at organizational level, at national level to addressing climate change. And those are the kind of things. So as individuals, you can do those things to see how you can reduce your carbon footprints.
Do we have in the Niger Delta, maybe in the broader Nigerian space, local climate action initiatives for those who might want to get involved? And how exactly can they do that?
Oh, there are many, many millions of initiatives to address climate change. And they're as simple as building, strengthening the capacity. First of all, the local communities may just know what is happening, that things are changing. They'll tell you, rain will not fall today anymore. This one. The local people, they have a way of deciphering what weather conditions are good for planting season, good for fishing, good for all those things. But even they too are getting a little confused because things are changing and not exactly the way they were before. So even they too need that capacity strengthening to understanding that this thing that you're seeing changing, don't worry about the gods. The gods are not to blame. If you remember, the gods are not to blame.
That's a good one.
Yes, so this time it is we need to improve, we need to transform, we need to move from just debate to action. And part of those things is one could improving the capacity of these community people to be able to understand what climate change is and also to also recognize their role, in preventing climate change and its impact, especially on them. And then bringing it down to their understanding how this is affecting what they're seeing today as flawed and all those related activities. And then what else can they do? The community groups, you have advocacy groups at the community level. You have strengthening the capacity where they bring forth what they have like a community joint force that look out for irregular bush burning, that look out for fire incidents. Those are terrifying incidents that without even saying it, ultimately have long-term impacts on, these issues. Then what about spillages? All those things contribute. All those things contribute. Spilling of oil, spilling of negative industrial waste. Industrial waste from companies has been noted as a key factor that affects climate change. You understand? So you discover that communities at that point, they advocate for best practices and best approaches, engaging with their local government, engaging with their state government, engaging with policy actors to be able to bring forth and implement or domesticate best practice policy initiatives, to addressing climate change. So there are many things. And businesses, if you go a step further to look at businesses that work within these companies or communities, and also businesses that work in different areas, you can now prioritize things like sustainability, ensure that your corporate social responsibility plans are built in to note the impact and importance of mainstreaming climate change practices that will prevent all these vulnerabilities that we are exposed to. So there are lots of things from the community level even to the school level, to the company level, to individual level that can be done, actions that can be taken, mobilizations that can be done to preventing the huge impact of climate change.
We have to go for a break shortly, but before then, I have to ask you this. What would you say to folks who perceive persons like you as doomsday anarchists who just want to shout and scream from the rooftops and tell us, oh, the water's coming to an end? But I mean, we've been here for I don't know, thousands, millions of years now, and the war is still going on. And these people won't just stop disturbing us, telling us the world is coming to an end, or climate change, this, climate change, that. What would you like to say to them?
Well, we are the treasured people of we are the treasured base of the nation. Let me put it that way. Known or unknown to them, that realizing how our early warning, they call it the early warning systems that you have in place. So those early warning systems, they are realizing that there are many things that they will have done prior to this time that will have changed the tide of things. We're telling you that climate change is affecting us, and this community is prone to flooding. Can you increase embankments? Can you increase the high level? Can you move these communities to a higher ground? And you say, no, forget it, no, forget it. And today, people's lives have been wasted just because of this flooding. Some people whose certificates they have piled up and kept, today they can't have originals. Nobody can tell me how difficult it is to get originals of anything now in Nigeria. I'm just bringing it down to our, personal, the impact. So you see that somebody who has all those things and suddenly comes home and discovers that their whole house was taken up by flood, has lost literally everything. What about the mental effect? And you are now saying, what would you have done better? Yes, you have done. There are things you call preventive measures. And those are the preventive measures. Conversations like this help us to understand that preventive measures, if you know this place is prone to flood, what do you do? Everybody should have a community development plan that relates to flooding. I call it community flooding, or not necessarily, because I don't want to restrict it to only flood, not being the only outcome, But if we all have a plan of action to address these issues at our community level, and the local government puts this together as the local government development plan in relation to environmental protection, I can tell you for free, by the time we have a statewide development plan of that nature, you will see that we will become intentional about being proactive. We become intentional about taking steps to preventing those things that are going on. What about the youth? Mindset orientation, quick money fixes. We need to help them understand that these things that you're doing that are affecting the environment today, they're affecting your health. I imagine that many could say, forget this health. After some, man must die, something must kill a man. You understand? But let it not be something that just killed you, something you're deliberately do. That is suicide. You're killing yourself because you know that you were told this thing will kill you and you still go into it. You understand? So we want to see how from the youth, from the communities, from the even emerging leaders, like people in the young ones in schools, primary schools, the companies are responsible in their approaches. And then the wider level, we have the wider level, which is government at a policy level. Everybody has a role to play in understanding these issues. And that is why when they say, why are you telling us the world should be? No, you are giving us wrong information. We're only giving out what we know as the early warning signs. We're only giving the early warning signals. We're only giving the early warning opportunities, and any wise man would take advantage of those information and turn their countries around. And there are not other countries that have different vulnerabilities, but today they have been preventive about their vulnerabilities. They recognize the challenges and they have provided measures to addressing those challenges early enough. And we Nigerians run to those places and to relax, to enjoy ourselves all year round are safe in its general term. But we can do the same here in our only two ways. And for us, we can't join the back to didn't stop talking. We can't even stop talking, because stop talking is a disservice to our country, to our nation, to our communities. We need to provide that information and look forward to people transforming that information to action.
It is Canvas and Niger-Delta Roundtable. On this edition, we're discussing climate action for dummies. My guest is a climate activist.
Yellow and black markers indicate pipeline and flow line right-of-way boundaries. Your activity could impact on the buried high-pressure hydrocarbon pipelines and flow lines, leading to possible leaks and explosion. Please keep off. Do not engage in sand mining or any form of excavation, pipeline vandalism, oil theft, and bush burning within pipeline and flow line right-of-way. Do not farm, trade, or locate any business on pipeline and flow line right-of-way. It is against the law to apportion land, sell, or build on pipeline and flow line right-of-way. Maintain a setback distance of at least 30 meters or about 100 feet from the right-of-way boundaries always. We care for your safety and that of the environment.
This message is brought to you by the Shell Petroleum Development Company of Nigeria Limited, SPDC, operator of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company, NNPC Limited, Total Energies, and Ajib Joint Venture.
Still Canvas, the Niger-Delta Roundtable, brought to you by SPDC, and on this edition, we're discussing climate action for dummies. My guest is a climate activist, amongst other things, Dr. Mina Ogbanga. Doc, welcome again.
Thank you so much. Thanks again.
And thank you for joining us as well. Remember, there's a lot that you can do as an individual or collectively. We can make a major impact as far as climate action is concerned. But speaking of impact and climate action, what roles do governments play in combating climate change, and how can citizens influence policy?
Okay, so government, that is the people. Government is the high level existence of any nation, so to speak. And a responsible government always yields responsible development across board. And so, because we're specifically talking about government and not companies or organizations or institutions, I will start by saying that governments, for example, if you know that government set regulations, they incentivize renewable energy, and then they provide this climate education for citizens that can at least support that understanding. So ideally, government's role can include things like even the people's role can include things like voting in climate conscious leaders, contacting our representatives to advocate for climate policies, participate in public consultations. Nigeria, for example, have the National Action Plan on Climate Change. Now, this National Action Plan on Climate Change, incidentally, we had an earlier DG who has now been replaced by another female doctor, and who I think is very passionate about climate change. Now, the point is, yes, we have that passionate person in place, leadership. Let's say leadership is in place. What do we do about this climate action plan? So first things first, the question is, how far have we gone with domesticating the action plan? How far have the subnational levels gone with adopting this national action plan? How many states have climate action plans? How many communities are in the know about such climate action plan? How is it affecting carbon footprint? How is it affecting a lot of things? So government has a lot in terms of regulations, in terms of prioritizing high-level conversations around the documentation. So how far have we gone? And this is just to mention one strategy to addressing climate change. And I just put that because of the action plan that we have in place. So you see that government has a strong role in ensuring the workability of these plans that they put in place. There's one thing to put a plan in place. We're very fast in putting policies in place, in putting plans in place, in putting legislations in place. We need to move beyond just those steps and see how we move from debate to action. How do we move in terms of implementing? How do we move in terms of providing an enabling environment for these policies and activities and jurisdictions or these legislations that we have put in place? How do we ensure their implementation? Successful implementation is the word, because at the end of the day, ultimately, they are supposed to ensure the growth of human. And how do we ensure that these plans we have are pro-people? Because if a plan is not pro-people, I cannot support it. I cannot agree with any plan that is not pro-people. A plan that is going to, weaken the economic system of the common man, we cannot accept it. You understand? So the point is, how can we interrogate that climate action plan to be able to be sure that it is in line with global best practices to provide the safe haven for citizens across the nation and make them indeed safe to know that somebody is taking care of climate change in Nigeria. So that is just one of the things to mention. So the roles of government are numerous, and by all standards, if we can just contextualize it under regulations, we can contextualize it under providing that enabling environment, we can contextualize it under ensuring that ministries are they're prepared. All ministries need to look from transportation ministry. What are you mainstreaming? What aspect of the ministries are we mainstreaming our climate? We need to be climate sensitive. That's the word I will use now. Every ministry is supposed to have the mandate of being climate sensitive. Every ministry is supposed to have as one of their objectives a deliberate and intentional effort at reducing carbon footprints. So what are we doing about it? Okay, so now I heard that, they reduced cars of citizens and leaders from 100 or whatever number they had to 3. That has reduced enough in terms of, that is a start. in terms of reducing carbon footprint, but is that the best way forward? So if we stop, for example, importing solar and start producing, that will not only increase job opportunities, it will also provide opportunities for lower prices of solar, because solar is one of the alternative, the proposed alternatives to fossil fuel. Because if you cannot do responsible drilling, then don't leave the oil in the ground. If you cannot go into responsible drilling, you must think of the people you're drilling for, and the policies of the government need to look into those kind of. So we have extractive industry principles. We have the EITI principles that guides this entire process. We have the EITI principle that looks at corruption issues. Government needs to be intentional about not being corrupt, because a corrupt government will definitely not make room enough to support community and development, to support human development and transformative processes. So there are lots of things that need to be put in place. We need to mainstream gender into this process. Government needs to know how to ensure that, even though everybody is affected, but you see that there are certain levels of people that are more affected by the impact of climate change than others. Like the elderly are more affected. So when you look at all these things, government has role to play in the policies that they put in place to addressing climate change and all those related issues.
Still speaking on action, speaking to action, and considering all the advocacy that's been going on, you and others in your community, and all the conversations we've been having, do we have examples of community-led action or community-led projects to address climate change?
Oh, fantastic. Community-led projects. There are different kinds of community-led processes that are addressing different issues. And you see that I'll mention some, because we're in this state, I'll bring it home. I will not bother much about the national spread. I'll just talk about and one of those community actions is smart agriculture. Smart agriculture now is the way to go. Smart agriculture that is resilient to a lot of the impact of climate change. It reduces vulnerability. It's an adaptive tool. It helps us to it strengthens our.
Do we have somewhere where that is actually going on?
Like in River State, in Abloma community, for example, it's one. Mind you, it's just one of the areas that have already been pursued down. Activities want to start on climate smart agriculture, where the Global Environmental Facility, that is GEF, and the UNDP are very keen, in promoting smart agriculture amongst women, in building their skills to be able to make their crops resilient to climate impact, to make their farming systems more innovative, more, to help them produce and plant irrespective of, the situation, where rain will not totally disrupt, where sunlight will not totally disrupt. It's going to you are going to have some level of farming all year round, depending on how the situation is. So the UNDP GEF is doing a lot in trying to support and work with the Center for Development Support Initiative to addressing those challenges in farming. They're even running what they call there are also different organizations, like in River State, we have what they call the Eco Farm radio program that helps farmers to understand latest technologies, local fabrications, local opportunities to enhancing their farming system. The extension agents, what extension agents will do. And it helps them now to get informed. See, information, education, communication is strategic in anything concerning agriculture. Early warning systems in terms of weather conditions is critical to farmers. It helps them to know when, how, what, you understand? And these are some of the things that the radio program is providing, and these are some of the information that the farming program with the Center for Development Support Initiatives and the small grants program that are given to the organization to see how information is out. And that is just one case in Abloma. There are many communities benefiting. Then you have the case from the in-school activities. You have in-school activities. Now there's an app, a web app now, that is, you can easily, get information on climate change, you understand? And you can also, what they have, like Club17 Africa is a club that builds capacity of students across the world. But let's say in Port Harcourt, for example, that many beneficiary clubs, you understand, there are many beneficiary schools that have benefited from information, education, and communication on climate action through what we call the Climate Action Club, that is Club17 Africa. Here they are taught a lot of strategic things on climate action, and they are able to understand climate change and able to now identify problems in their different schools, peculiar to their school, and seeing how they can work together to provide solutions. A school that was destroyed by waste, because you see they didn't have any waste anywhere to throw waste. They threw the waste anywhere. They did a lot of things, and you see that already it caused a lot in terms of congestion in the environment. But after this kind of and training and capacity building, the executives of that, because every climate change club has an executive, they initiated the waste to wealth program. You see that waste is now money, because everybody's struggling to get the bad, but as you are drinking, somebody's looking at you to take that bottle from you. You understand? Which was not the case before. So you are dropping a bottle, you are dropping money. You see? So now they have a waste to wealth process that addresses this kind of things. Some schools, they have flood committee, which is what we're recommending, like to the state now, for us to have in our flood committee in the state. We will continue to work, to encourage their implementation of the different initiatives to reduce the vulnerability to flooding in River State. That is one of the state level interventions that can go on. We have now policy also that how do we adopt? We need to adopt. We adopted it in the 9th Assembly. That is the River State Climate Action Plan in the 9th Assembly. So now in the 10th Assembly, there will be need for us to revisit it and confirm it so that the governor, His Excellency, can assent to it, and it becomes a statewide policy, a legislation for implementation. So you see that different levels currently ongoing. As an organization, we have pushed for that, and it has gone to the level of, it has been passed into law, but now it needs to be assented to by the governor, and hopefully that will also lead to more strategic implementation. We have things like the Niger-Delta, have climate change conferences that are a key activity that are going on, right? Like the climate change conference ended yesterday, or day before yesterday, and it was a conversation that looked into practices. What are those practices that are affecting us? How can we put an end to irresponsible mining, irresponsible fossil fuel drilling, irresponsible practices, and enhance best practices and options, explore alternatives to move just transition. Just transition is the conversation. So you see that from the school level, there are some examples. From the community level, I've given you one community level. And the next community level is converting all those their weeds that affect them and also cause flooding, converting it to accessories. People are converting water hyacinth into accessories, converting it into belts, into clothes, I'm a live witness to what happens there. Converting into tables, to home accessories. So they're not only reading the communities of the impact of this weeds, they're also transforming it into money and income generating opportunities. So there are lots of examples. I can't even start.
Speaking of some of the actions, or lots of the actions, man-made actions you have, of course, adduced that are responsible for the climate change we're experiencing. One could also attribute it to technology and innovation, the automobile, and lots of other innovations. We need to power these things, and maybe they are contributing in no small way to climate change. Speaking of technologies and innovations, do we have innovations now? Maybe they're still on the horizon, maybe they were us already, that are helping to deal with the issue of climate change.
Okay, excellent. AI for climate change. Let's start with the simple ones. AI for climate change. You don't want to know about anything. You want to see how you want information. You can easily get that in having your assistant give you information on what it is. Having your assistant train you on what you need to do. So we are turning that tool into a very accessible tool for many people who can utilize it to get information, education, and communication. What about the issues around advancing renewable energy technologies? We talk about advancing renewable energy technologies. There are so many, and it's all part of the just transition process. So when you talk about renewable energy, you discover that there are lots of alternatives we can explore, including solar and no solar. There are lots of alternatives that we can explore in the renewable energy space. I know Nigeria has a renewable energy plan, or master plan. So the point is, how do we ensure that we bring this plan fully to light in terms of implementation? Because for anything to be done in Nigeria, there needs to be a proper budgetary allocation for it, proper collaboration and partnership, proper build-up, to that effect. So how intentional are we in ensuring that those provisions are made so that we can see a smooth, just transition that will benefit the people? You understand? So you talk about even carbon capture and storage. Carbon capture and storage, We don't want the one. A lot of people had issues with the red project. A lot of people had issues with the red project. So if the red project is preventing communities from enjoying what nature has given to them in the proper way, then we cannot accept it. We say no to it. We say no. We just say leave it. Leave the forest for the people to use the way they're using it. But so we need to think outside the box of what are those alternatives to carbon capturing and storage that will still benefit communities, and they will still be part of it in enhancing their livelihood. Then what about exploring electric vehicles? You understand, technology is doing that. You see, you are driving a car, but a typical Nigerian may first of all be afraid of entering a car that nobody is driving. They'll say, listen, this is their village people, they've come. You see a car, you sit down and say, no, I'll wait for the driver. No, no, no. Even when the driver is driving you in the car, some of them lose faith in terms of, you're too fast or too slow. Talk less of not having anybody to talk with. So people have that robot-driven cars as a fear. Some people have electric vehicles as a fear. But then electric vehicles have been explored in different countries. Can we explore it in Nigeria? Is it a sustainable transportation system that we can manage? There are many other ways we can, can we utilize water instead of fuel? Can we utilize different options are being explored? What about climate resilient agriculture, which is part of the smart agricultural scheme? A lot of technology is being put into that process. And then technology for education. I've told you about how we are using technology through the web applications and then the mobile applications to educate, to inform, to communicate, these issues around climate change with the world and with schools. In Rivers State alone, we have over 100 clubs have benefited from this process, and we want it to go further. We would like to collaborate with the Ministry of Environment, Ministry of Energy, and as many people, Ministry of Youth, as many people as possible, as many ministries, institutions, governments, to see how we scale up this information.
Speaking of scaling up,
yes,
and getting people involved, maybe older generations haven't done a great job as far as climate action is concerned. But like you said, you and others in your community are early warning system, and you must keep talking about it. You must keep the conversation going.
Yes.
So, like I said, maybe the older generation haven't done a great job in saving our planet. How can we inspire the next generation to take this more seriously and start acting even now?
Fantastic. So action now. So you're talking about information, education, and communication is very key. One of the ways to do is to integrate climate education into school curricula. That is one of the ways. That way you're having small step, but big impact. If the whole of Nigeria knows that the Federal Ministry of Education, they are trying to change the curriculum. So let climate change. This is the time to integrate climate education into the curricula. If you want to put it under general studies, the same way they brought in entrepreneurship, you understand, into the curricula. Now, everybody, at least before you leave university, before you leave secondary school, you'll have heard the word enterprise. So it's up to you to know what to do with that information. If you leave primary school and you don't have any business, you leave secondary school, you don't have any active enterprise, it's your own, it's for you to take responsibility for that. Not that you were not taught in secondary school. As for university, it is mandatory for you to learn entrepreneurship. So entrepreneurship has been integrated into our curriculum. And my own duty, for example, as the head of department, is to implement it, to make sure that students, go a long way to learn it. So if they can do that for entrepreneurship that many thought would never happen, they can do that for climate education, because you should be very innovative, and you should be very, innovative about your curriculum. Curriculum are not meant to be stale. You understand? So we need to integrate climate education into, just like the same way we're also advocating for the integration of SDGs. If you integrate SDGs anyway, you are indirectly integrating climate change education, because climate change is goal 7 and goal 13 of the SDGs. So you can also lead by example, show young people how to, impact on sustainable actions, and then encourage youth-led climate initiatives. But in other ways, the next generation needs information. The next generation needs education. The next generation needs communication. And a lot of institutions are now working on community of practice on climate change. There are lots of institutions now working on community of practice of climate change, where they are building and mobilizing young people to be able to take action. And you can mention the Ashokas of this world. You can mention the different donors and partners of this world that are intentional about building the next generation of climate activists. There are lots of innovative activities young people are carrying out right now. We have the COP29 that recognizes youth. You know that the UN generally has a component for young people. And that component deals with all these issues. Climate change is at the fore. As COP29 now coming up, Conference of Parties, you see that climate change is the big issue that is going to be discussed as well. So you see that empowering the young generation, for us at our local level, information has been strategic, education has been strategic, communication has been strategic. Then implementing what they have heard through addressing their local problems and taking action to addressing their local problems have also been very strategic. So you see that it goes beyond talking. It's about action.
Sorry, you've probably touched on this before, what I'm about to ask now, but I'd like for some emphasis. What is one surprising fact about climate change that most people don't know?
Wow. Most people don't know that climate change affects not just the environment, but also the human migration. Human migration patterns are being affected by climate change. You see, with an estimated like 143 million people projected to be displaced by 2050. And they're all being displaced due to climate-related factors. And so a surprising fact that people don't know is that it's affecting our migration pattern. You see that people are leaving their communities, people are leaving cities, people are leaving areas. Go to Lekki now. It's supposed to be a big boy center. But if they tell you what they go through, you will not understand. The feeling is like the money you are earning, use it to protect and preserve. You understand? That is what happens because it's considered a highbrow area. But the environmental challenge they face there is beyond imagination, caused by human activity. Either poor drainage, could also be high sea level, impact of sea level rise, a lot of things that are going on. So you discover one surprising fact that people don't know is that it's going to affect displacement migration patterns. They think it's just environment is affecting, but it's going to affect human, migration. You see that migration patterns will change. You see that educational issues, topics, a lot of things will change. And all these effects are things that are going to come as a surprise to many who are not prepared or who are not ready for the surprise that climate change comes with.
We're wrapping this up shortly. If you could give one piece of advice to someone or anyone who feels overwhelmed by climate change, because all that you've said right now can be overwhelming for someone who's listening to this or watching this right now. If you had one piece of advice to give that person, what would it be?
You need to stay informed. You need to understand what the whole process of this climate change is about. You need to know from your individual level what you think you can do to preserve yourself. To preserve yourself, to preserve your environment, and to preserve those around you. You need to think about supporting climate policies. That is at a policy level interference. You need to talk about advocating for systemic change. There needs to be an intentional step. Every local government chairman by now should start thinking, how do they address the potential impacts climate change could have? So if I want to give one advice, my advice will start with the word intentionality. My principle, I have what I call the intentionality principle. I have what I call the intentionality theory. That theory states that you must be intentional about taking action. You must be deliberate. So intentionality means you must mainstream climate change issues into your budget plan. Intentionality means you must mainstream climate change action into your advocacy plans. Intentionality means that budget that you have allocated for climate action must be implemented in line with what has been allocated for it. You understand? Mm-hmm. So you look at all those things, and then you look at the extractive industry principles. You look at all those things, put them together because they talk about, that there are new EITI standards that are in place now. And these EITI standards are helping us to see how we can address issues of extractives, which are a core part of the climate change. You understand? The extractives are a core contributor to climate change impact. So if we're intentional, my word for each and every one of us is be intentional. Intentionality is key. Intentional about what you eat, intentional about what you drink, intentional about how you go about your activities, intentional about how you live your life. You need to be intentional about how you thank God, how you commit yourself to things. A lot of things from the local level to the global level, intentionality principle works across board. If we're intentional about protecting the environment will be fair to us. If we're intentional about protecting and planting trees, these trees will come up to shade us. If we're intentional about loving each other, we will find ourselves less intentional about killing each other, because if you discover that there are practices that you're carrying out that are affecting your neighbor, you reduce on those practices. So intentionality is the word for me. My advice to everybody is think about how you can intentionally be a part of reducing the impact of climate change.
And on that note, we come to the end of this edition of Canvas and Niger-Delta Roundtable. We have discussed on this episode climate action for dummies. And I'm sure you get the points now, no doubt about that. Thank you for watching and listening, especially many thanks to my guest, climate activist, among several other wonderful things that she does, Dr. Mina Ogbanga. Many thanks for your time.
Thank you so much, Dyer. Thank you so much. It's always a pleasure being here with you all.
Catch the podcast and other episodes on our social media platforms. You can see that possibly later on or somewhere below. I'm Adidai Ilushakin. Thank you once again for joining us. And remember, be intentional about cutting your carbon footprint and contributing to saving our planet and a better world for all of us. Bye.